Well, football season has ended. Many of you are starting to tune into college basketball, both the men's and the women's side, and perhaps you've stumbled upon the Women's Basketball Podcast, Mia O'Brien alongside Mitchell Northam, where we cover all things women's basketball, not just the college ranks, a little bit of WNBA, Unrivaled, Lord knows there's a lot of drama there right now, and so we'll touch on all of that in today's program. But first, Mitch, how are you as we sit here on this fine second, I guess technically, week of February, so about 4 weeks remaining in the regular season?
I'm good. I feel rejuvenated after a night of hate at the Super Bowl where, haters of the Chiefs got to win, haters of Drake got to celebrate. We got to see Serena Williams sea-walking on national television. It was great. I'm feeling good.
You have some haters in the Little Apple, and we're going to address them here in just a second. One of the winners, though, that we will briefly pay tribute to from Sunday's Super Bowl game was, of course, none other than South Carolina head coach Dawn Staley. Yes, she lost earlier in the day. We'll also touch on that here in just a second. But her birds get it done. I feel so bad for Dawn. I've been texting in our group chat with producer Dimitri. I'm like, this poor woman, every NFC championship game, every Super Bowl, she's still got to work that day. And I understand it's the heart of women's college basketball season, and Dawn knows this. But at the same time, I am glad that while it was a loss to Texas on the road, hopefully Dawn at least got to watch a good amount of the Super Bowl and her Eagles, the champions. At long last, the Chiefs have been dethroned.
Yeah, there was it looked like Dawn was able to move on from the Texas loss pretty quickly. So I'm happy for her for that, because there was a video circulating of her online in one of those oversized Brian Robinson hats, wearing an Eagles jersey and dancing it too short. So good for her. I'm happy that she got to yell "Go Birds" and celebrate a Philly win.
I'm happy for Dawn. I am also happy, put it on the record, for one Angel Reese. We're going to get to our Her of the Week, which we lead every show with in just a second. But Angel Reese is the honorary Her of the Week on the Women's Basketball Podcast this week, because she officially is the first female athlete to have her own burger at the mothership, McDonald's. And here on the Women's Basketball Podcast, we're about to try the McDonald's Angel Reese burger for the very first time. Mitch and myself have gone out.
Oh, we're going to do this now. Okay.
Oh, we're doing it live. We're going to do it off the top because I did buy mine about 2 hours ago. So mine's about room temperature right now.
Mine's fresh. I've got mine about 10 minutes ago, so okay, my fries are still hot.
Warmer than mine. Presentation. Shout out to my local McDonald's. Presentation is great. So for those who are unfamiliar, this has barbecue on it, so it's got bacon. I'm very curious. So here we go. Cheers, Mitch. Again, I got mine like 2 hours ago, so it's a little dry, but I'm not going to call McDonald's for that.
The barbecue sauce is really good, I have to say. Mm-hmm. That's a good touch.
Now, producer Dimitri did say he felt like the mustard is lacking. What say you?
There's mustard on mine. Is there?
It might just be the cheese.
No, it's just cheese.
Well, either way, if you hear us eating throughout the duration of today's podcast, now you know why. We wanted to celebrate Angel. Yes, I am celebrating Angel Reese. I am also going to celebrate Kim Mulkey a little bit. I'll get my digs in as well on this podcast. I did want to note that not only is this burger at McDonald's available nationwide, which is an incredible achievement, not just for Angel, her brand, her marketing team, but also for women's sports, of course, at large. But additionally, she also has like this high C drink thing going on. Mitch has assured us he didn't get the Angel Reese high C.
I got one soda.
He just like Angel likes the orange drinks. I did not. It is also Shamrock Shake season, so I could not say no to an old Shamrock Shake. So I also have one of those that we'll be munching on a little bit.
Mia, I think the burger is really good, but I'm going to make one more modification to this. Since Angel Reese is from the great state of Maryland, I think these fries need a little something. And so
a little what? Oh,
I got some Old Bay, and you're not really a true Marylander unless you have a custom Old Bay dispenser, which I have, and I bought at a little store in Annapolis. So we're just gonna kind of.
I'm blown away.
Yeah,
because
we're
of
just
course
gonna
my boyfriend Kevin is from
pour
Maryland.
some of this on,
and I always have to buy it from the store. I now we know next time we're in Maryland, I'm gonna have to buy one of these.
Free tip McDonald's. Old Bay on the fries. Does it right for AngelReese. Shout out to AngelReese. Shout out to Maryland.
And even then, I think that could be a permanent thing. Like Angel can change McDonald's forever. Like I think this is a great thing. If they do the Old Bay on the fries, you'll stand out more. Free advertising, free advice, McDonald's, take it or leave it.
Free ID, Ronald.
Right. Ronald, we're just looking out for you and the Hamburglar, one of my all-time favorite characters.
But not Grimace.
Speaking of the Hamburglar, we will get to WNBA talk a little bit later. We're going to hit the college ranks to begin today's program, excuse me. But I do want to pay tribute. We have a lot of nicknames for different WNBA players, specifically those on the IndianaFever in this household. And it's how Kevin remembers their names. And so he affectionately refers to Grace Berger as the Hamburglar. And so when she was released by her home state of Indiana, the IndianaFever this week, he was so sad. He was like, oh, we need the Hamburglar. We need the Hamburglar to be home and help sell tickets. Even if, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston do a lot of that themselves. But I digress. Our Her of the Week. Let's hit it, Mitch. Our Her of the Week traditionally, I feel like, goes to the player in women's basketball, professional or college, who statistically has the greatest performance. We've awarded it to 40 pieces. We've awarded it to freshmen who are setting records in the SEC and the Big East. This week, we're going to go a little bit off script. Not that we haven't already by starting the program with a food tasting, which is obviously great radio and great podcasting. Mm-hmm. But we are going to award this week's Her of the Week to a certain Texas player. And before I say who it is, Mitch, I just want your take. In Texas's 66-62 victory, would you say Madison Booker was the most important player on the floor for the Longhorns in that win? Or was there a different name, perhaps this week's Her of the Week, that you said, maybe this person's more important than we thought for Vic Schaefer and company?
I'll let you sing the praises of the Her of the Week, but I did think the combined effort of Texas's front court, which include Madison Booker and Taylor Jones in her sixth season of college basketball, was really the difference in that game, especially when you look at, Texas. Texas did something to South Carolina that never happened to South Carolina, which is that they dominated them inside. Texas points in the paint, 40-26. Texas rebounding 42-35. That's how this game was won. Texas beat South Carolina without making a three-pointer. Super impressive.
And no one did that more in the second half, because Taylor Jones obviously was critical in the first half, but Vic Schaefer makes the decision to keep Kyla Oldacre on the floor in favor of Jones. Oldacre ends up going for 13 points and 6 boards. I felt like it was way more in the moment. And that's why she's this week's Her of the Week, Mitch. Yes, I know Madison Booker is the bus driver for the Longhorns, but I have to give it to their 6'6" center, because and I know she's the backup technically. She's not asked to go out each and every night and put up double figures, but she did. And to your point, and to the fact that we are eating live on the air right now as we're recording, she feasted. She feasted on Sanaya Fagan and company, and it really wasn't that close. And the step back jumper she can stop and pop from about 15 feet out around the charity stripe, it was as lethal as any shot I saw in women's college basketball this weekend.
Yeah, I was actually on radio in South Carolina today with our friend Dimitri, who was filling in down there. And I was telling him and his co-host, South Carolina is not in danger by any means. They're still 22-2. They still look like a team that could get to the Final Four. But bracket luck is a real thing. And when they get into March Madness, now I'm even talking about the SEC tournament that's going to come around here soon. When they get into those, big tournaments and big games, and they get matched up against either a really, really talented center like a Lauren Betts, who they lost to earlier this year, or a team like Texas, which just has options in the front court and a lot of skill in the front court. When you talk about the combination of Madison Booker, Taylor Jones, and Kyla Oldacre, that's going to give them problems. Like they just, without Ashlyn Watkins now, I mean, this is something that you and I have talked about all year, even before Ashlyn Watkins got hurt, that South Carolina did not have the same imposing front court that they've always had. And they didn't have that true go-to center. And, now even more so without Ashlyn Watkins, like their front court just isn't as intimidating and they just aren't getting the job done, to be honest. The combination of Chloe Kitts and Sanaya Fegan and Joyce Edwards, like it's just not really getting the job done. And so South Carolina has some things to figure out there. It's not often that they get out rebounded or outscored in the paint. And that's been the recipe here lately. And so I wonder kind of as they go into the SEC tournament, if they see Texas again, or they see even LSU again, and they don't get the friendly whistle where they're allowed to just beat up Anissa Morrow, how does that game go if they don't figure some things out?
Which brings us to number 1 in this week's starting 5, a perfect transition, some may say. Mitch, you are now concerned whether or not South Carolina, after the SEC tournament, let's say they win it, even if they don't win it, are they still in play for a number 1 seed with the resume they have as of this writing?
I think as of this writing, yes, they're still a number 1 seed. They are probably not the number 1 overall seed. I think that right now is one UCLA, who is still undefeated, the only undefeated team in the country, who has a win over South Carolina. I don't see how UCLA is not the number 1 overall seed at this point. But if South Carolina has any more, losses, mistakes, whatever, the rest of their regular season schedule is pretty manageable. They do have a game against UConn. I think they should be able to handle the Huskies at home. They do have to go to Vanderbilt, which is not a circle win anymore. And they do have Kentucky at home. Those are 3 games I would keep an eye on. But then, like I mentioned, you have the SEC tournament where they might have to run into a Texas or an LSU again. I think if South Carolina loses, 2 more games, 1 to 2 more games, and doesn't win the SEC, I think that number 1 seeding is in jeopardy. Because as I mentioned, like UCLA is the number 1 overall seed. I think Notre Dame is probably going to run the table in the ACC. I just don't see another ACC team that's going to beat them right now. So if Notre Dame runs the table, I think Notre Dame has a real stake to get the number 2 overall seed. And so then you're kind of sorting out, okay, who gets the 3 and the 4? And really what's at stake here for South Carolina is, do you get to play in Birmingham, which is close to, home base there in the SEC? Do you get to play there in the second weekend of the tournament? We got 2 sites this year for the Elite 8 and the Sweet 16. One's in Birmingham, one's in Spokane, Washington. The number 1 overall seed gets to choose where they go. UCLA is going to want to stay on the West Coast. They're going to want to go to Spokane. The number 2 overall seed, whoever it is, I think right now you're probably looking at Notre Dame. If things go the way that we think they're going to go. I don't know where Notre Dame is really going to want to go. They're up there in the Midwest. I don't know if Birmingham or Spokane really does them.
Anywhere that's not the Cayman Islands. I think that's safe to say.
Exactly. I don't know which one does them any favors. And then I think, the 3 seed is probably going to go to whoever wins the SEC tournament. If Texas wins out, I think Texas has a strong case to be seeded over South Carolina at this point. And so we'll see what happens. But I think that's something that you don't want if you're South Carolina. You don't want to get sent out to Spokane and have to deal with that. And if you're a South Carolina fan who's looking to travel, you definitely don't want that. You're probably looking at the bracket going, I'd rather spend my money to drive down to Tampa instead of flying out to Spokane. So I think that's what's at stake right now for South Carolina. Can you kind of get your act together enough, where you don't have any more inexplicable losses? I think if South Carolina wins out the rest of the regular season, they could afford a loss in the SEC tournament and still hold on to a 2 or 3 seed where they would get the opportunity to play in Birmingham. But I think at this point, like, that's in jeopardy, and I think it's something that Gamecock fans should be worried about.
I would like to note that we are 7 minutes into this discussion between her of the week and the first item of business in our starting five. And I have yet to mention Malaysia Fulwiley's name, someone who on a previous episode I mentioned that, and I understand this is part of how the South Carolina team is built. If she was to be the featured player for Dawn Staley and not just a rotational piece, the sixth woman who brings energy off the bench. I understand, yes, she's fighting a shoulder injury. She exited the game on Sunday for whatever reason, then came back in, then got pulled again. I don't think Dawn ever specified if that was injury related or not. But for me, 13 points in 21 minutes. I've been saying it for months. She is the best pure athlete and arguably the best basketball player on that roster. And at this juncture, I just don't understand the continued hockey shift rotation. I understand it because you have 10 quality starters, but she, in my opinion, is the best player. And it's frustrating to see. But ultimately, it's Dawn's team, and this is how she wants to run it, especially because she doesn't have that true back to the basket center this year.
Yeah, I think Malaysia Fulwiley is certainly the most talented player on this team. I think the reason why her playing time has been sporadic is because still, even now as a sophomore, like she's somebody who has a tendency to be like incredibly undisciplined on defense and incredibly reckless at times on offense. I mean, that's what got Malaysia Fulwiley benched last year at North Carolina. And that's happened a couple of times, even into this season now. But that's something else I brought up, when I talked about South Carolina earlier, is like, I don't know who the bus driver for this team is. That's something we talk about a lot here, but like last year and in previous years, like we've talked about before, that player was always the big center. It was Camila Cardozo or it was Aaliyah Boston. When things got tight last year, that's who they turn to. Okay, just throw it inside of Camila. She's 6'7". Nobody's going to be able to stop her anyways, right? Like yesterday when the game got tight, it looked like nobody wanted the ball. There was a weird play with Tessa Johnson and a layup. Sanaya Fegan.
Raven Johnson, then a Tessa Johnson back to back, like both missed the layup.
Yeah. So you got missed layups like in crunch time of a big game. And then there's a sequence where with 9 seconds to go, the shot they settle for is a Sanaya Fegan three-pointer, who is not a three-point shooter whatsoever. So like that's another thing that South Carolina just has to sort out. It's like who wants the ball in those moments and who's getting the ball and who is going to step up and make those big plays when they need them to, because this is probably not going to be the last time that South Carolina is in a tight game. I think we can say for certainty now that South Carolina is not the juggernaut that they were last year. Do they have potential to win the national title again? Yeah, of course. But is it like a guarantee, like we see this thing coming like we did all last season? No, I don't think so.
It truly was a super Sunday, not just because of the big game, but because after we got Texas, South Carolina right on the mothership, it went over to Baton Rouge, where LSU prevailed 82-77 over Tennessee. We will touch on that game, but first, we must note that this was the battle, our new names. And again, this is Kevin, I think, is his third reference on the program. Our new names that we have given the two head coaches in that matchup, Killa Kim Caldwell and Cash Money with a K, Kim Mulkey. Mm-hmm. And Killa Kim fell to Cash Money, but she did beat Gino, the first Tennessee victory over UConn earlier last week. Since 2007, Killa Kim Caldwell is just the second Tennessee coach in program history to defeat Gino Auriemma and the Huskies, behind only Pat Summitt. The baby bump, we've been calling for it. It finally arrived last Thursday, Mitch, as UConn falls on the road to the Lady Vols. Yes, the Lady Vols then come back down to earth a little bit, and they lose to a team that, as we've noted on this podcast, I think has arguably the best big three in the entire sport when all is said and done, depending on how you view Notre Dame and if it's a big three or a big two. And for me, Tennessee is light years ahead of schedule. I don't know what the future holds for them in the next month and a half and how far they'll go in the NCAA tournament, but the future is bright. And Killa Kim Caldwell, I'm proud of Tennessee. They got it right.
Killer Kim. Yeah. This was a monumental win for Tennessee. Just kind of getting one back in the rivalry, the renewal of this rivalry, kind of starting a new chapter here. They just played really, really well, and they do what they do. They took a bunch of threes and they made the couple that they needed to. They won the rebounding battle by 12. Pretty impressive when Sarah Strong is on the other side. I thought it was a huge win for Tennessee and a big performance by them. Even despite the loss to LSU, I put Tennessee in my top 10 this week. I think I had them 10th overall, and I had UConn 11th, just behind them. And I think my worry about UConn coming out of this game is like, man, Paige Beckers just didn't play well at all. And I don't want to say shied away from the moment, but that's certainly what Gino Auriemma kind of accused her of after the game. They had, I think with Paige present, he had a pretty intense answer about her kind of not playing up to expectations and her acting like she's not the best player on the court in this kind of big game. She shoots just 5 of 16, 14 points. Does have 8 assists, but again, in a big game like this, you expect her to kind of will you to a victory. And you get 18 points and 9 rebounds out of Sarah Strong, but I don't know. There's just something off about this UConn team. And I have less belief in them, than I did earlier this season. I think I came into this season thinking that they were the favorites for the national title. And I just don't think that anymore. And I would be kind of surprised if they get to the Final Four. I just think there's a lot of really good teams out there this year, and they're just simply not acting like you expect a UConn team to act. They're not acting like they're the best team, and that's sort of what we should expect out of UConn. And we just haven't seen it. And I don't think they're getting any better by playing a lot of the scrubs in the Big East.
And that's what I was going to say. Is that part of why they don't have the killer instinct, because they're beating teams by 30 plus points every single night?
Man, maybe so. And they're just kind of getting comfortable and getting used to it. They're going to play South Carolina, as previously mentioned, coming up here next Sunday. That's going to be an interesting game for both teams. I think a UConn win in that game would say to me a whole lot more about what kind of team they are than a South Carolina win. I expect South Carolina to win that game by double digits at this point. And I worry about what UConn's future is as we head into March Madness.
One quick note from me on Tennessee, then I'll quickly get your take, Mitch, on LSU Tennessee. Here are some of the results over the last month for Killer Kim, Caldwell, and the Vols. They lost 71-70. That's a 1-point loss at Vanderbilt. They lost 80-76 at Texas, had them on the ropes. That's a 4-point loss. So that's another 2-possession game, or 1 to 2 possession game that they lost. They then lost 70-63 versus South Carolina. We'll throw that in there just for fun because it's South Carolina. They beat Mizzou 76-71, another 1-possession game. They beat UConn 80-76, another 2-possession game. And then finally, they fell at LSU 82-77. That's the difference right now between Tennessee and UConn. Yes, the Huskies have the better record, but you cannot sit here and tell me that the Vols are not battle tested every single night. They're in the weirdest games possible. They're in every single game, and they've now shown that they can win those tightly contested contests.
Yeah, I just I look at UConn's schedule and I kind of wonder at this point now, what is their best win? They've lost to Notre Dame, they've lost to USC, they've lost to Tennessee. So is their best win? Is it over North Carolina and Greensboro back in November? It might be that game, which when that game happened, I wouldn't think, now that we're in February, that that would stand as their best win on the season, but it kind of is and I think if you replayed that game right now, I think North Carolina has figured out a lot of good things about itself. And I think that game is a lot closer if you replay it today. So yeah, the prognosis for UConn, I don't feel good about the Huskies heading into this last month of the regular season.
LSU, it's the Kaylin Gilbert game. She drops 23. The big three, Anissa Morrow with 14 and 14. Another day at the office, another double-double for her, although she was limited in the fourth quarter as she did have 3 fouls, but whatever. They decided to hold her out at different points. Michaela Williams did foul out of this game. She had 16 points. Flau'jae Johnson held to just 12 points in 25 minutes. Water is wet, especially when it's home. LSU is going to get the job done because if nothing else, that trio is so battle tested. And now when you add in some of these other younger pieces, that's a team that I look at and I say, we're not talking about them. They could go back to the Final Four.
Yeah, the thing that impressed me about LSU in this game is like they kind of learned something about themselves, I think, from the South Carolina loss in that, my complaint about them in that game was like they didn't do enough to help Anissa Morrow. And now in this game, you get the 14 of 14 from Morrow, and you also get double digits in scoring from Michaela Williams and Flau'jae Johnson and Kaylin Gilbert. And you also get 7 dimes from Michaela Williams and Flau'jae playing some good defense. So, this was a game where everybody stepped up and did their job, and I think that was important as the takeaway from this one. I think it's possible LSU finishes the regular season with just 1 loss. They do play Texas, which is going to be a big game coming up here this week. They also got Kentucky and they got Alabama. But man, I mean, more and more like the SEC tournament is looking like the most interesting conference tournament to me.
And once again, the SEC, the best conference in men's basketball and women's basketball. Speaking of conferences, one that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet, I'm going to sit back, enjoy my AngelReese burger because the floor is yours, Mitch Northam. We led this program off by referencing the haters in Manhattan, Kansas. They are real. They are spectacular. They are in your mentions, and they got a little bit of a one-up on you, but then came back down to earth a little bit. Tell us more about the hot mess that is the Big 12 conference.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have to come on here and do like a whole lot of apologizing to Kansas State fans and admit that I was wrong and all this other stuff, because on Wednesday they did what I didn't think that they could do, which is they beat TCU pretty soundly and comfortably. They covered the spread, beat them 59-50. I was really impressed with the thing that stood out to me the most was just the way that Kansas State seemed to have a defensive game plan and stuck to it. They didn't let Sidonia Prince get deep in the paint. They made it really hard on her ability to catch the ball near the basket. And then when she did catch the ball, she was far away from the basket and she had to put the ball on the floor, which led to her turning the ball over several times. They made things difficult on Haley Van Lith. They made things difficult on, all their shooters. Sidonia Prince shined. It was just really like a solid defensive clinic and a really impressive win by Kansas State that I didn't frankly think they were capable of. But then we get to Saturday, another, big day in Big 12 play, and Kansas State loses by 30 points to Oklahoma State, inexplicably. Like I didn't get to watch this game. I was away from my desk and my computer and my TV. And so, I go back and I look at the stats and like, after all those compliments I had about your defense, you let Anna Gret Asi make 8 3-pointers against you. And so, 85-55, Oklahoma State gets the big win. My big takeaway for the Big 12 is just like the Big 12 is a mess. And it seems like the upper hand always goes to the home team. If you look at the Big 12 standings right now, there's 5 teams ranked. Kansas State, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, West Virginia. They're at the top of the table. Little soccer speak there. Out of all of those teams, there are just 2 home losses between all those teams. Kansas State 15-0 at home. TCU is 16-0 at home. West Virginia 13-0, Oklahoma State 14-1, Baylor 13-1. So the home team is the winner, I think, in the Big 12. I just think this is a league right now where like there are a lot of really solid and good teams who on the right night can win and pull off upsets. We've seen that with TCU and West Virginia, now Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Baylor's coming on strong. but I don't know that there's a great team in this conference. I don't know that there's a team that can contend for a Final Four. But I think that the Big 12 tournament is going to be really interesting because ain't no home court in that. It's all neutral site. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, the Big 12, super messy. And then right there outside of that top 5 is Utah, who I still rank this week at number 25, and Iowa State, who has Audie Crooks, and you can never count them out.
By the way, there are some folks in Manhattan, Kansas that would argue that they and the folks in Lawrence do have a home game in the Big 12 tournament, since it does take place in Kansas City this year, Mitch. I'm just saying, the haters, they're going to come back for
Sure.
you.
If you go to Kansas City, you go to Joe's Barbecue. That's my recommendation.
Well said. From the Big 12 to the Big 10, as we keep this week's starting 5 moving, the biggest news, I would argue, is from the biggest big in all of women's college basketball, but certainly in the Big 10. Lauren Betts, something we debated on last week's episode. She has indeed announced she is coming back for her senior year in Westwood, which is obviously a massive development for Corey Close, the number 1 team in the country. UCLA remains undefeated. They sneak out a 62-52 victory over Oregon, which of course followed a 65-52 nail biter win. Not really much of a nail biter, but it wasn't. It came down to the fourth quarter win against Ohio State at home. I'm just curious, Mitch, for you. Like, I watched this UCLA team, and yes, they are the last undefeated team remaining, but I don't get this sense of they are the undisputed best team in America right now. And part of my concern with regards to that is because I don't think the Big Ten is nearly as good as it's been the last 3 years. And so are the Bruins actually getting tested night in and night out?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I do think that while I would consider UCLA like one of the best teams, and I still have the number 1 in my top 25 poll, because at some point, like, you are undefeated and you have earned that spot, I feel like. But yeah, as far as like the undisputed, unquestioned, this is the best team and they're going to win it all, I'm not totally on board yet. I think if you put a gun to my head and ask me today who the national champion is going to be, I think I would still pick Notre Dame. I would too. Eyes test, like, I think they're the most talented team. But UCLA, yeah, I would agree with you. I think the Big Ten this year, like, it started off really well, like when Maryland was humming in the top 5 and, Ohio State was undefeated at one point. I think USC is kind of like not been as impressive as we've wanted them to be this season. I think Ohio State is a little bit of a pretender. Maryland's dealt with some injuries. Michigan State just lost at home. Yeah, I think that the Big Ten is not quite as deep and as good as it has been at the top this season. I would agree with you in that for sure.
Let's round out this week's starting 5 with a little foray into the WNBA. Take it away, Mitch.
Yeah, so last week there was a tweet that came out. I believe it was from a reporter at The Athletic about the WNBA filing some trademarks for some now defunct teams. I think there was 5 of them, Houston Comets, Miami Soul, and the Charlotte Sting. And I was like, that's interesting. And then a couple of days later, there was some stories about a bid that this family, the Berman family, that I wasn't totally 100% familiar with, was launching a bid to bring the Charlotte Sting back, to bring the WNBA back to Charlotte. And so my spidey senses went up, and, so I started kind of poking around on this. And I got an email from a spokesperson from the Charlotte Hornets today who confirmed to me that their ownership group is involved in a WNBA expansion bid. The bid from the email I got reads, Hornet Sports and Entertainment believes strongly in the future growth of women's basketball in the WNBA. The Charlotte Sting have a storied history and a passionate fan base within our community. We are proud to back the Berman family and be part of this larger group that is bidding to bring the WNBA back to Charlotte. So a bid for the Charlotte Sting, a bid to bring the WNBA back to Charlotte is legit. I'm hoping to have a story about this by the time folks hear this, but if not, you heard it here first. Breaking a little news on the Women's Basketball Podcast. That is legit. There is an expansion bid for the WNBA to come back to Charlotte. and I'm trying to learn more about it. But I think it says a lot that the Charlotte Hornets ownership group, which by the way is not Michael Jordan anymore. He sold his majority stake in this team, I think in 2023, I think a year or two ago now, to Gabe Plockton and Rick Schnall, who are both kind of hedge fund private equity guys who have a lot of money. So I think that their involvement really matters. And this is a change of tune from the Hornets because they said, I think as recent as last summer, that they weren't really interested in dealing with bringing a WNBA team there. So little change of tune.
Okay, so this is very interesting, Mitch. I went to Google. I just went to search Berman family Charlotte. And when I did, the first suggested Google search was Berman family Unrivaled. And I'm looking at a press release from Front Office Sports with regards to Unrivaled and their various rounds of funding. And from January 7th, it says several more star athletes have invested: Coco Gauff, Alex Morgan, Carmelo Anthony. Our original story continues below. The Berman family led the round. The family, which runs a credit card lending business, is not related to NWSL Commissioner Jessica Berman. Mm-hmm. But we just refer to them as the Berman family. Like, who are these people?
Yeah, I spent like an hour today kind of internet sleuthing, trying to figure some things out. So the person leading this bid with Charlotte, her name is Erica Berman. Her father is Don Berman, who, is the founder and executive chairman of this company called CardWorks, which bills itself as a, quote, leading credit card and payments company based in New York. The Berman family, I found out, has donated millions of dollars to Davidson College, which is based out just outside of Charlotte, alma mater of Steph Curry. Berman's company, this is Don Berman's company, CardWorks, was nearly acquired by Ally, which has a headquarters in Charlotte, in 2020 before the deal was terminated. But I think that's notable because Ally is a major player in women's sports sponsorships. They sponsor the ACC women's basketball tournament and a lot of NWSL stuff. And of course, the Ally tip-off, which has been in Charlotte the past 2 years. Erica Berman is a senior vice president at this company.
Okay. Got you. Okay. This is starting to make a little bit more sense to me.
Yeah.
Kevin's very into credit cards. So I actually just texted him in the other room and I was like, I need you to like go down the rabbit hole for us because you understand finance way better than I do. And maybe he can give us some more research for next week's episode because I'm rather fascinated by this shadow Berman family that just operates under that moniker and the mysterious lending company that Mitch was able to debunk exactly who they are. That is everything you missed this week in the world of women's basketball. We'll have a few more notes at the end. Don't you worry. We'll get to some WNBA juicy storylines. But first, let's look ahead to the week that is to come, Mitch. Let's set the table. What games do you have your eye on?
Yeah, this is kind of a big week. So starting off,
it's so big that 2 of the 3 games are on Peacock, although that's actually kind of normal now just because respect to NBC, respect to the Big Ten. There's a reason they put half of Caitlin Clark's senior year games behind the paywall and on the cock.
Yeah, on the cock, as we like to say.
It is what it
is. So to start off, I don't have this game, I think, on the docket here. Oh, yeah, I do. We'll get to it in a second. So we'll skip that. So, okay. So to our appetizer, actually kind of a low key, this is unranked, but I think a really good game. This is Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. This is St. Joe's at Richmond. These are, I think there's 3 really good teams in the A-10 this year. St. Joe's being one of them, Richmond another, and George Mason also in that company. I think the A-10 is going to be a multi-bid league this year. And I think that, if St. Joe's or Richmond doesn't win the A-10 title, I think one of them has a pretty good shot of getting into the tournament. George Mason also in that mix. I think that St. Joe's is notable right now because they have a player, Laura Ziegler, who's coming off a 43-point performance against Loyola Chicago. So has the ability to really fill it up. So that should be a fun game. We've talked about Richmond on this podcast before. I think they're one of the better mid-major teams in the country. So that'll get us started off on Peacock on Thursday night.
And then you can just keep it locked into your streaming service for this week's main entree.
Yeah, keep it locked into the cock. We're going to go Thursday at 10 p.m.
We can say the cock on this podcast because in women's basketball, the Gamecocks are regarded as one of the best historical programs in the sport. All I know is when A'ja Wilson ended her retirement speech with, or not her retirement, her jersey retirement speech, her jersey retirement speech with "Go Cox," I was like, only in one place, one locale in the entire United States can you say that, and everyone cheers and goes crazy, and it's Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, just cheers for the Cox. This is Thursday, 10 p.m. On the Cock. Number 1 UCLA at number 6 USC. I'm a little mad that this game tips off at 10 p.m. Eastern, but this is a must-watch game. This is UCLA and USC. This is a rivalry game. This is Lauren Betts versus JujuWatkins, so 2 of the front runners for National Player of the Year, I think, at this point. This is going to be a great game, and a lot at stake for both teams.
And it's not a surprise they put it behind the paywall. This is a game that the folks over at NBC, they circled it when those 2 teams, along with Washington and Oregon, came to the Big Ten. Before basketball season tipped off, before football season tipped off, you knew this one was going to be on the streaming service. So hopefully it gets the ratings that it deserves with both those teams, yes, in the top 10, but as we alluded to, maybe not quite living up to the expectations that so many were expecting. This final game, though, it's on the mothership. Tell us more, Mitch.
Yeah, and we've already talked a lot about both of these teams. This is Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern on ABC. So easy to find, easy to watch, easy to see. Number 5 LSU at number 3 Texas. Kim Mulkey versus Vic Schaefer. Madison Booker versus Anissa Morrow. This is going to be a lot of fun, and might be the first of 2 games that we see of this matchup if we get this in the SEC tournament again for a chapter 2. But yeah, this is a must-watch game. This is a top 5 matchup. Check this one out.
We could honestly do an entire chef's table of just the SEC at this point.
We could.
We will try to share the love and spread the wealth, but I mean, talk about blockbuster, especially that entree and the dessert. So yes, we will give the Big Ten their flowers as well. Those aren't the only games we have to look forward to this week because Mitch is going to make you some money, maybe, possibly. Another 1-2 week last week, so he's sitting at 500, folks. It is a massive week, not only because of the games that are on the calendar, but because this is the week we get back above 500. 3 games over 500.
Yeah, we gotta make some money this week. Kansas State really putting the hurting on me last week there. So we're gonna start off with the Big 12 and start off with the rule that I just laid out. So this is Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus. This is Arizona at number 25 Oklahoma State. I'm gonna take the Cowgirls as a 7.5 point favorite to cover the spread. I just think that in the Big 12, you got to take the home team. And I also just think that Oklahoma State, coming off that big win over Kansas State, I think they carry that momentum against the Arizona Wildcats, who have been kind of a mixed bag of results this season. Not good, not bad, just, kind of there. Not really doing a whole much to excite anyone. So I think Oklahoma State keeps rolling and gets that dub.
Your next one's interesting to me, Mitch, because I am very big on the bounce back in the worst way. After a team has a massive upset victory of some kind, an inevitable letdown, even if they don't lose their next game, but they don't cover the spread. You don't believe that to be the case, though, for Vic Schaefer's Longhorns.
No. This is Thursday night at 7 p.m. on ESPN2. This is number 3 Texas at number 8 Kentucky. I'm going to take Texas as the road favorite and to cover an 11.5 points. I'm doing that just because I think Texas is really, really good, number 1. Number 2, Kentucky is on a short week. They're playing tonight, Monday night, against Ole Miss. So they're going to have one less day of recovery than Texas does, one less day of planning for their opponent than Texas does. And I just kind of think like Kentucky hasn't played like all that tough of a schedule yet. Like they really haven't gone through like the really tough gauntlet in the SEC yet. They did beat Alabama and they did win at Oklahoma, but they haven't played Texas. They haven't played LSU yet. They haven't played Tennessee and they haven't played South Carolina. And so I think we're about to see through the next couple of weeks, like what this Kentucky team is really made of. But I think that Texas is going to get this one.
The Cats have an absolute gauntlet to end the regular season. They are home against LSU on February 23rd. They are home against Tennessee on the 27th, and then at South Carolina on March 2nd. Yikes. I mean, look, we're on this podcast. We bought Kenny Brooks stock long ago once he entered the SEC. And then, of course, before that, during his time at Virginia Tech. But man, that will certainly change the seeding one way or another for the SEC tournament.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's a good team. I just think that Texas is a really good team. And, big shout out to Kenny Brooks. I think this Texas team is a whole lot better than Kentucky is right now.
We've got one more game that Mitch has picked and served for you, and this is a little upset special, at least according to the folks out in the desert, and it comes from the Triangle. Tell us more, Mitch.
Yeah, so this is Sunday. This is the game that I'm going to be at. This is 2 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, so it's on the mothership. This is number 10 North Carolina State at number 12 North Carolina. I like the Tar Heels as a home underdog to cover 1.5 points. I think that they're going to win this game. As much as I've sung the praises of NC State this year, and I think they're playing really, really well, NC State has a really hard time winning at Carmichael Arena. They've lost there 3 years in a row, usually in this rivalry, which unfortunately, one more shake of the fist towards conference realignment. We only get this game one time this year in the regular season, which I hate so much because in the Triangle over the past couple of years, like this is the game that's had the juice. This is the game where like both coaches have fed into the rivalry and played the game. And this is the one that has like really mattered. But we're only going to get it once. But anyways, NC State has lost 3 games in a row at Carmichael Arena. I think UNC is really good. Oh, I had basketball reference up and an ad just started playing. Bad basketball reference. Anyways, yeah, I think that North Carolina is going to defend home court. I think NC State just for whatever reason has a hard time winning a Carmichael, and this is a game where usually the home team wins.
And as we've noted, this is an NC State team that there were questions about, especially the first 2-3 months of the season. And it's really just been in this last month or so that people have started to believe once again in the Wolfpack.
Yeah, and this is a game where, I feel good about where NC State's front court is going, and I've eased off some of my concerns. But this is a game where they're going to go up against a really talented big in Maria Gokdang, an experienced veteran front court player, 6'5", can block shots, can score inside. Is Tilda Trigger going to be equipped and ready for that kind of challenge? We'll have to see. I think it's going to be a really fun and really close game. These ones usually always are. Hopefully not the rock fight that Duke UNC was a couple weeks ago.
That set the sport back thousands, not just hundreds, but thousands.
Pre-Naismith, yeah.
It's time for last call. The storylines that we've missed in today's episode somehow, some way. We'll begin in the WNBA. GabbyWilliams was cored by the Seattle Storm earlier this month, last month. The days, they all blur together. But Mitch, she goes back to a Storm team that, well, yes, it has Skylar Diggins-Smith, who has certainly reminded people that she's a pretty darn good basketball player, even at 33 years old, in Unrivaled over the last few weeks. Nika Mule's coming off of a significant knee injury. Nneka Ogwumike is back, but she's 34 years old. Yes, they signed Alicia Clark. She's 37 years old. I'm a little fascinated because I thought there was a chance that GabbyWilliams could have been on the trade block.
Yeah, me too. I thought that as well. I think GabbyWilliams returning to, as you put it, whatever is left of the Storm is good for them and good for Skylar Diggins-Smith. I still don't really know like what to make of the Storm quite yet going into this season. They just have a lot of interesting pieces in the post Jewel Lloyd era.
Yeah, and then you throw out the draft capital that they acquired. And That makes it even more interesting. Speaking of teams that we don't really know what they will look like to begin the 2025 WNBA season, I have described the position of my fellow Monmouth County, Ocean County, Jersey Shore Conference product, MarinaMabry, as such. Have you seen the Will Smith Fresh Prince meme where he's in the, well, it's not a meme, it's a scene from one of the episodes from back in the 90s, but he's standing in the room. They've moved everything out of the house, and Will's just kind of looking around at the empty house, and he just realizes he's the only one left. That's MarinaMabry right now. She was traded to the Connecticut Sun midway through last season. She was promised a shot at a championship. The entire starting five of the Connecticut Sun from a year ago have departed in free agency and or a trade. It is the first time in WNBA history that has happened. MarinaMabry was the sixth woman for the Sun a year ago, but at the same time, yeah, I understand why she requested a trade earlier this week because, with a new coach, with a roster that no one really knows where it's headed. Are they trying to get into the JujuWatkins sweepstakes, the Hannah Hidalgo sweepstakes? No one really knows at this point. Lauren Betts, perhaps. I don't blame Marina at all. And it's just another storyline to come out of Unrivaled and the pseudo wobble of sorts that is Miami over the last month and a half.
Yeah, I don't blame MarinaMabry at all. She went to that team to play in big games and to play in the playoffs and to win a championship, and that didn't happen. But I think she proved her worth, down the stretch of the season last year. She was a major piece for them off the bench as they went into the playoffs. It's kind of wild how the Connecticut Sun just sort of fell apart. And it all started with, Stephanie White just saying, deuces, I'm going to the Fever. And then from there, you trade Alyssa Thomas, Tawana Bonner walks away, the entire now your head coach and your top six players gone. The looks of it from the outside looking in, it looks like this is a team that is sure going to compete for the number one overall spot in the 2026 draft. So, I don't know who that player is going to be quite yet, but the Sun hope it's a good one.
Yeah, I do want to give respect. Natasha Cloud did sign with the Sun as a free agent. J.C. Sheldon was traded from the Wings in that massive deal. Tina Charles went back to Connecticut this offseason. So, I don't want to disrespect them and say they don't have pieces, but it's a rather fascinating situation that Connecticut finds themselves in. Speaking of rather fascinating, this is not on the rundown, but because I was at, and I forgot to mention off the top, Mitch, I was at the Players Championship Media Day earlier, and one of my colleagues in the media corps here in Jacksonville, whose daughter is a big basketball fan, and so they both, father and daughter, have really gotten into the W over the last 2 years because she's in middle school. He wanted me to know that he believes the fix is in. The WNBA has made its decision. The IndianaFever are winning the 2025 WNBA championship. And I said, Marcel, come on now. Come on. Tawana Bonner is not going to move the needle to a championship. She's going to help you and fill that veteran leadership that's needed. I don't think that Sophie Cunningham is going to suddenly take a scoring output that was already pretty darn good. It was, in the second half of the season, it was top 4 consistently in almost every single metric and suddenly make them the favorite. But he said, and he roots for the Sparks. And he said, he's like, a lot of people who think, there's some what do you call it? Ventriloquist
puppeteering. Someone pulling the strings.
Yes, pulling the strings from I don't get that vibe because I don't think the Fever signings have been quite as earth-shaking for the league as some of the trades we've seen.
Yeah, if the fix was in, my question would be, okay, well, who's my question for the Fever right now is who on your team is guarding the other player's best big? Who's guarding Asia Wilson? Aaliyah Boston will put in a good effort towards that, but come on. Who's guarding Nafisa Collier? Who's guarding Brianna Stewart? As we kind of get into next season and as the postseason progresses, I wonder if that area is something that decides games for the Fever.
Yeah, I think they have to be drafting a big one way or another. I don't even know. I haven't looked at what mock drafts are saying for the May WNBA draft, but it's got to be a big, and that's even with the signings that they've made. I do not think that there is some shadow government trying to ensure the Fever win the title. Although I think they've done a great job of bringing in pieces who have playoff and finals experience in hopes of helping that young core. A little bit of a foray back into women's basketball before we go, Mitch. Juju's viral moment with Lindsay Gottlieb, her head coach, on the bench. USC pulls out the win, but people were a little critical of the body language. I know you said this is just this is what Juju is. This is who she is. That's how she sits on the bench, win or lose. I know some other people have felt a little differently.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought, it was funny,
it's a meme waiting to happen.
It was very clear that Juju wasn't listening to a damn thing that Lindsay Gottlieb had to say. But it is kind of like indicative of, I think that this season has quite not been what we expected from JujuWatkins. I think everybody just expected her to sort of like take the torch from Caitlin Clark and be this player that like is electric and like is must watch every single night. And like, while she is a really, really, really great player and is, I still think, a must watch player, she's not putting up like the astronomical numbers that Caitlin Clark did, and not producing, I think, like ridiculous, you have to look at this highlights in the same way. I mean, Juju's game is not making logo threes like Caitlin did, right? And like, you kind of look at the numbers too, and like, Juju's scoring is down this season. She really hasn't improved as a 3-point shooter. 31% last year, 32% this year. Her rebounding is down. Her assists are about the same. So I think it's kind of, people are going to kind of use that clip, I think, as an entry point to talk about how Juju hasn't really improved this year, hasn't really gotten better. Now saying that, where she's at is still really, really good. She's 5th in the nation in scoring, and USC looks like one of the best teams in the country. So, how much do you need to get better? But I think someone like Hannah Hidalgo and Lauren Betts, and the reason why those two are kind of, I think, the front runners, if I looked at the odds right now, are the front runners for player of the year, because they have gotten better and you can see it and you can feel it. And Hannah Hidalgo does produce those, you have to look at this highlight. And Lauren Betts puts up some of those like, oh my gosh, look at these stats in terms of the blocks and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, we won't go into we won't open the can of worms, I should say, because we're running out of time for the Hannah Hidalgo versus JujuWatkins, who is the more electric, highlight, fun to watch player, because we could spend an entire hour on that. One more note from the college ranks, because it wouldn't be the women's basketball podcast episode without an Iowa reference. Not sure if you followed this one, Mitch. This is from Bailey Turner, who is the SID, the sports information director for the Iowa women's basketball team, who were victorious on Thursday night over Minnesota up in Minneapolis at the barn. Here is the itinerary for Iowa for that game. At 4 o'clock, Central Time on Wednesday, their bus departed the campus of the University of Iowa. They then arrived at the Eastern Iowa airport at 5:30. They shut the doors of the plane and headed off to de-ice. At 5:45, they attempted to take off. At 5:47 p.m., they had to abort takeoff halfway down the runway. They taxi back. They hang out. 7:45, they board the plane again. At 8, the engine won't start. The wheels are frozen. At 9, the pilot says they can't go. They de-ice the wheels and props on the plane anyways. They tow the plane to proper de-icing again. That goes on for about an hour and a half. No airport in the Minnesota area would take them by midnight, and so they had to stay at an airport in Cedar Rapids before returning to Eastern Iowa Airport in the morning, having to de-ice for an hour and a half, leaving at 11:35 and finally arriving at 12:34 to play a game less than 7 hours later, which they won. And so it's a credit to Jan Jensen's squad, but it's also just a testament to the Midwest this time of year. I didn't realize until we were coming back from Las Vegas or going to Vegas, whatever it was, for my day job at 1010XL, the Jags flagship radio station. And we flew through Minneapolis and we had to de-ice. And so like, I didn't think twice about it. I was like, okay, like I'm used to it. It is what it is. But for my contemporaries and my colleagues who are from the South, the idea of having to allocate 45 minutes to de-ice a plane was something they were not familiar with. And so if you don't know what de-icing is, now you do. And you also know that Iowa had to overcome a heck of a lot before they even took the floor at the barn.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that term before.
Yes, de-ice. So you've never been on a plane that's been de-iced?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's like they pull the plane out, right? Like they normally, you leave the gate. Instead of going right to the runway, you go off to this other area and they spray you down with warm water. And there has to be, in theory, as I found out through the Jaguars situation when they were trying to leave their season finale in Indianapolis, there needs to be multiple de-icing people spraying you down if you have a large enough plane. Because unfortunately, when temperatures are really cold, you could spray the one side, and by the time you spray the other side is frozen already. So yeah, it's a fascinating process that I really didn't get to experience until I moved to Iowa in 2015. But yeah, and it's a real thing. And I just don't know why they didn't get on a bus, because there was no snow. Like, it's a 4-hour drive. Just get on the bus at that point. But hey, they got there. They got the dub. All is well.
Okay. Shout out to de-icing.
Shout out to de-icing. Mitch, you have a programming note for us before we get out of here.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the listeners know and folks who read me that beginning next week, I won't be at For the Win anymore, but I will be at SB Nation, where I'm starting a new job covering women's college sports, which includes not just women's basketball, but softball and volleyball and all the other things. So, so check me out there.
Does this mean we get to talk women's lacrosse too?
Oh, women's lax. Yeah, maybe.
As the newly minted play-by-play voice of the JU women's lacrosse team for all of their home games on ESPN Plus this spring, we could talk a little lacrosse. I did play it as well, so little known facts. I think people assume I'm from Iowa and I played basketball. No, I'm from New Jersey and I played soccer and lacrosse. So very fun stuff. Very excited for you, Mitch. That's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. I know you mentioned you will be at NC State UNC. Any other games for you on the docket this week?
No, that's the only one, because I have a wedding to go to on Friday. My sister-in-law is getting married. It's the first time I'm officiating a wedding, which will be interesting. So.
Well, I look forward to hearing all about it. I am on vacation the second half of this week and very much looking forward to that as well. But we will reconvene next week for next week's episode of the Women's Basketball Podcast. He's Mitch. I'm Mia, saying we will catch you next time.
Deuces.